Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest aliens and UFOs video. Well, I'm mixing this particular video here because I realized it's actually been a while since I've touched this playlist. In fact, I had to scroll back through some of my sets here, and then that's when I realized, oh my goodness, I haven't touched this playlist at least until November of 2020, so it's been a good number of months. As such, I'm going to definitely go back to this playlist as soon as I finish my Cryptids and Monsters series, so be on the lookout for more aliens and UFOs video soon. This entry, though, has to do with a fascinating case, an encounter that occurred there in Brazil, 1952. What makes it so fascinating is the fact that there's 5 pictures that were taken that are arguably considered some of the most authentic proof of UFO photos ever. There's been analysis associated with them, and then there's been reviews, and then they've been looked at and inspected, and to this day, even though some people still consider the photographs a hoax, a lot of others contend that it is possibly some of the best photographs on record. In fact, you're looking at one of the pictures here. But it has to do with this. It's known as the Barra da Tijuca Brazil UFO encounter. So let's go ahead and let's talk about all the interesting information associated with this very, very brief encounter, but amazing how just such a brief timeline can still add so much intrigue so many years later. So here's what occurred. On May 7th, 1952, there in Brazil, there's an area known as Barra da Tijuca, and if you went there, as these two gentlemen did, that's apparently where a UFO, a sideways, actually UFO, was encountered. Here's what happened. On that day, the two guys' names were Jairo Martins and Ed Keffel. They were working for a magazine. It has a unique name. I think it's called O Cruzeiro, something along those lines. And one of them was the writer, the other one was the photographer. In fact, it turns out it was actually Ed Keffel who was the photographer and Joe Martins was the writer. That's when they were there on assignment. It was around 4:30 p.m., so you can imagine that it's pretty much out there in broad daylight. I don't know exactly what the assignment was. I didn't get more specific information on that. If anyone has more info on that, then please post it in the comments. Whatever the assignment, though, was, it was suddenly interrupted when Joe Martins realized that there was an object approaching their area at an extremely high speed. He stated that he knows airplanes. He's apparently been around them for a long time. He could know and classify what kind of airplane this would be. Unfortunately, it looked like nothing he had ever seen before. He described it as a very strange plane that was flying sideways. So imagine your classic UFO, in other words, the classic dome-shaped UFO on top and on bottom, but instead of it being upright, imagine it turned sideways. So in other words, it's almost like somebody took a saucer, like a plate, and then threw it, and then it went through the air in a sideways fashion. That's essentially what was happening here. Whenever he saw this, he pretty much shouted out loud, "What the devil is that?" And then that's when the photographer, Ed Keffel, was there. And finally, he had the right mind, Joe Martins, to yell. It's almost like instinct. You could think that because he's a reporter, it's all about getting the story first. In other words, shoot first in terms of photographs and then ask questions later. That's when he ordered, like he told the guy, "Shoot, Keffel, shoot." And then that's when Ed Keffel immediately grabbed his camera, which you're looking at a representation of. It was known as a Rolleiflex. And then he was shooting for about 60 seconds. I don't know if the camera could take pictures really, really quick, because it turns out he got 5 pictures within those 60 seconds. Those are of the flying disc as it was passing by. Whatever this thing was, it just passed by their area that one time only, and then that was it. It was gone. I don't know if it went straight up in the air afterwards, as is noted in so many other UFO encounters, or if it just pretty much went back into the horizon wherever it was heading, and then it just disappeared outright. Or maybe, who knows, because there was some foliage in and around that location, if it disappeared over the horizon behind some type of foresty type area. Either way, though, once it was gone, and those brief 60 seconds at least gave Joe Martins and then Ed Keffel an opportunity there in Barra da Tijuca to be able to take these classic pictures. And of course, this was considered very, very sensational stuff because this is the kind of stuff, again, that absolutely just captures imaginations. The idea that even though he hadn't seen a UFO before in the past, he classified it as an unidentified aerial object and he knew that he was onto something. And so he turned it in there to the magazine, O Cruzeiro, and then there they were able to publish it and so on. What happened afterward, though, was interesting. There was some skepticism associated with the photographs because people began analyzing it and looking at it and inspecting it, trying to figure out, is this real or is it not? And in fact, this picture here is the one that has been the most heavily scrutinized because of this. Apparently, on the bottom left, you'll see that foliage I was mentioning earlier. Well, it looks like, according to the skeptics, the light is coming from the right. In other words, whether it was the sun or something else, it's bouncing off the right-hand side and it's causing the foliage to look as it does. But in the UFO picture above, the one that's pictured above, you can see the light is coming from the left. It's casting a shadow. Whatever that inner circle is, that inner imprint on the bottom of the UFO, you can tell that there's a light coming from the left. So people are stating, how can that be that there's two different light sources, one from the left, one from the right, within the same picture in of itself? The sun is pretty much only in one direction, right? Well, this guy, Joe Martins, he actually created a statement. This was something that was signed and endorsed by him and then also the photographer, Ed Keffel. And he saw the skepticism, he saw what people were stating, and he wanted to clarify and make sure, absolutely, that there were no ill intentions. In fact, he went on to derive this. I wanted to show this paragraph within the statement. He said, "Neither I nor Ed Keffel tried to derive any financial profit from the fact being that they turned this in through their assignment. We were at the time exclusively contracted by that review, which was the magazine O Cruzeiro, and there we handed in our report and the photos without receiving any extra bonus for either. Neither did we receive nor did we wish to any payment from anybody, either for the account or for their photos or for their appearances we were practically obliged to make on different occasions on television. I narrated the fact in free talks to military authorities and university auditoriums." So he made this statement, and there were some other paragraphs as well too, but that was the one that stood out to me. Because obviously the idea is if it was faked, if these were fake pictures, they were the only two witnesses to this encounter, then there might be some financial incentive associated with it. But he outright declared that no, there was nothing else given to him extra for this particular set of photos and whatever was documented afterward. They were there just for another assignment, as is. That's what they were getting paid for. And then this happened to them. And so it just happened out of blue, and that's their honest statement, in other words. Speaking of the authorities and then the military, as it turns out, the Brazilian Air Force also conducted an investigation to try to see what was happening with these photos, and then they found that they were genuine. I don't know if they actually, looked at the negatives and inspected those and did reverse images to try to find if there was anything else that looked suspicious or funny, but unfortunately, their actual investigation and the results from it did not come out until 1959. So that was about 7 years later that occurred. Plenty of years again for these duos to go through a lot of scrutiny on their end. In fact, the impression I got when I read the full statement from Joe Martins was it was almost like it was great at the beginning that him and the photographer saw the UFOs and captured these photographs and then of course published them, but then the scrutiny became too much. It was almost like this was a bad side effect of this encounter that was totally unexpected but was continuing to stay, and that the impression I got was that they almost wish like they didn't either see this UFO or introduce the photographs because of all the headache that was involved afterward. But at least with the Brazilian Air Force, again, they were on their side by stating that the photographs were genuine. I don't know if they were officially stating that the UFO was genuine, But again, at least with regards to that, they were stating that the photographs were not doctored and that these were professional photographs done as is. There was another investigation done, Investigation Commission on Flying Saucers, that was also introduced by the Brazilian Air Force. And then they decided, they did their own investigation on that part too. But that's pretty much it. That's all the information I could find on these photographs. I do gotta say, the photographs do seem pretty genuine. First impressions, in other words. So whatever occurred there at Barra da Tijuca in Brazil, to these two guys, João Martins and then Ed Keffel, they've stuck to that story pretty much forever. I don't know if they're still alive to this day, but they pretty much stuck to that story and then it changed things afterwards. So it gives the impression again that this is absolutely real. But again, if anyone has any more info, maybe somebody that visited that location, the Barra da Tijuca, the one that this place happened to have the UFO whiz by, then someone that knows more info on the local side, then please post those comments below. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care.